Uh, TMS is a really wonderful depression treatment that uses very high-powered magnetic pulses to stimulate the brain. It's been known for a long time that there's areas in the brain that are underactive in patients with depression. We've also known for decades that ECT is a brain stimulation treatment that's our most highly effective and one of the least utilized depression treatments that we have, ironically. In TMS, what we're doing is we're delivering these high-powered pulses and literally making a focal area of the brain fire without inducing a seizure. And in making that part of the brain fire, we actually stimulate brain growth, release of brain growth factors that restore the normal activity in that area. What I tell my patients is it's like exercising your brain. We're using that part of your brain by literally forcing it to fire. And just like when you exercise a muscle over time, it gets bigger and functions more. And that's what we see happen with TMS. Over time, gradually, people's depression will lift. It isn't an immediate effect. It's something that builds over time, that takes some weeks of treatment. It's not as fast as what happens with ECT. It's kind of like on the schedule of what we see with antidepressant medication in terms of the improvement. But it's a very useful technique because we're not using electricity to stimulate the brain, which is painful. We're not using seizures to stimulate the brain as an ECT. We're using a magnetic pulse, which penetrates the brain, goes right through. There's no impedance as it goes through the skull. And yet it will make the neurons in the brain actually fire, but at a sub-seizure threshold. So it's a great way to deliver energy to the brain. It's a great form of brain stimulation that's actually very benign, has very few side effects, is extremely safe, and highly effective. You do feel the pulses. Now, you can't feel a magnetic field, but the pulses we deliver are the strength of a small MRI machine. It goes up to 1.6 Tesla of a magnetic field. And when you run a pulse through a neuron, it's like running a pulse through a wire. And you create some electrical current inside that neuron, and it makes that neuron fire. And while we're aiming at the neurons in your brain, you have nerves in your skin. And you have sensory nerves in your skin. And so all the sensory nerves in your skin, under the magnet, fire as well. And so you feel this, my patients call it a woodpecker tapping on their head. They feel a tapping sensation. It's not painful, it's annoying, I would say. But it gets easier and easier with every subsequent treatment. And it's not something that causes patients to drop out of treatment. It's very tolerable. People have different degrees of how much they tolerate it, but generally it's very tolerable. So you do feel it because we're actually also making the nerves in your skin fire just like we're making the nerve cells in your brain fire.
It almost sounds like maybe a similar sensation to wearing a TENS machine.
Yes, and that is also a technique that makes nerve cells fire using electricity and only going skin deep. Okay? It takes a lot of electricity to actually get into your brain, which is why you have to be asleep for ECT. You actually have to put people asleep. Whereas our patients are awake, alert, they take no medication, they drive themselves home from treatment. In fact, many of them go to work after they treat with us in the morning. They have to make no adjustments in your day. I mean, the biggest thing we do is give people some Tylenol. We have a really high compliance rate. I think part of it is the patient is coming every day and we see them, we form a relationship with them, we're taking care of them, they know they're doing this. We also know that we have a high compliance rate because we're observing it. We know, it's not like you don't know how often your patient's taking their pill, but we know that they're coming in for their treatment. But they like coming in for their treatment. It's a good experience for them. They're pleased to see the staff and the technicians who are delivering the treatment, and the patients are enthused to have a new treatment that they've tried, because the majority of our patients have tried and failed multiple antidepressant medicines. And many times they've kind of reached the end of the line with their doctors, and they just are kind of satisfied to just remain kind of chronically depressed. And so they're very excited that there's something new that gives them hope. So our compliance rate's very high. And again, we also know, because we're observing every treatment, that the patients are getting the treatment. Well, we talk about remission and we talk about response. Remission means complete resolution of symptoms. The stated research is a 37% remission rate and about a 58% response rate, which is a 50% reduction in symptomatology. We just ran my practice's data, and we're getting higher figures than that, I think, because of higher dosing strategies that we're using now and better techniques than what we even had in the studies from a few years ago. But it's important to note that we're getting these figures in people who have failed other antidepressant treatments. We're getting these figures in the treatment-resistant populations. A typical antidepressant medicine, when it comes out, will have a 30 to 35% remission rate and maybe a 70% response rate. But that's in a population that's cherry-picked of, if you're treatment-resistant, you don't get into the medication trials, okay? The people we're doing in TMS trials are the exact opposite of the people who get into medication trials. We're treating people who are highly treatment-resistant. Typically, insurance in my area requires failure of 4 or even more antidepressant medications before insurance will cover. It's not unusual that we've had a patient who's tried a dozen antidepressant medications. So to get those remission and response rates in that population is outstanding. So I consider the antidepressant effect of TMS to be a step above the antidepressant effect of medication. It's probably a step below the antidepressant effect of ECT. ECT is still the granddaddy of our most potent antidepressant treatment. But again, ironically, it's when we use so little because of the side effects. So the thing I find exciting about TMS is we now have a brain stimulation technology like ECT that improves upon the rates of response and remission that we're getting from medication. It really gives us more antidepressant potency that approaches ECT without the side effects, and it's very safe and very well tolerated. So that's what's exciting about it.